Good afternoon, everyone. You're probably more interested in having chats with each other, and that's a good sign of any event. So I apologise if I'm interrupting those exchanges, but a train beckons, so I have to speak rapidly and make a few key points from a European Parliament perspective. This morning I had the pleasure of meeting some of you over breakfast, and we discussed the key issues. And I made some points about where the European Union and indeed the European Parliament sits in all of the conversations here today. I'm not sure how you felt, but I've been on an emotional roller coaster listening to the various presentations. On the one hand, you could be deeply depressed by the huge challenges faced by our oceans. On the other hand, I've been deeply elated to hear that there are solutions. And indeed, from our keynote speaker, John Kerry, it was very clear that we can, as human beings, react in a positive way and meet the challenges that we face. Those who know me will know that I usually deal with land-based issues, so agriculture and rural development. But of course, the challenges that we face on land are exactly the same as at sea. We are at a point of knowing that we cannot continue to push nature beyond her natural boundaries. That goes for our soils, our air, our water. And equally, when we look at our oceans, we cannot keep exploiting without facing the consequences of that very word, exploitation. We have to manage more sustainably, and we can do that. And I always reflect that the European Union, for all its imperfections, has one huge strength. We have a number of countries, 28 today, who sit together and have decided that we can deal with big challenges collectively rather than doing that independently as nation states. And I hope that we value that cohesion. And even though it might take us a while to make decisions, when we do, we are world leaders in many areas, particularly around environmental protection. And indeed, when we deal with our islands, and Ireland is one of those, with our island nations that are here today, we want to work with you. We want you to see collaboration with all of Europe, and particularly the European Parliament, as hugely important in meeting the challenges of climate change, of sustainable fishing, sustainable tourism, and everything to do with our coastal regions of the world. And because I was coming to this event, I had to learn more about all of those difficulties that are faced by island communities. We had a very interesting presentation made to us in the European Parliament in Strasbourg by the President of the Marshall Islands. And it was one of those speeches that will resonate forever in my mind, when the President of the Marshall Islands said that for her country, climate change isn't a threat in the future, it's a reality today. And that the very oceans that are the lifeblood of her country and her islands were actually threatening their very survival. And it did give me a shiver when you hear it directly from a leader who's trying to protect her citizens in a very upfront way. It also challenged us in Europe to make sure that what we do does not have negative consequences for the island nations. And I'm conscious, and I go into a lot of schools and we talk about recycling. And in a way, European citizens feel very good about the fact that we recycle, and that is a very positive development. But we need to look at where the waste ends up. And I think that is something that we need to start doing, not thinking that way, but thinking in a circular way. And the circular economy is certainly something that we're driving. And because China has said they're no longer taking our waste plastic, we face a huge challenge in Europe. And that's something we haven't quite addressed yet. So we worry that the rubbish will end up in different oceans rather than in ones that we know today. We know we have got to clean up our act literally, and in other ways as well. We also have an opportunity as countries that work together with huge research capacities. I was out in the exhibition hall, and I recommend it to you, with great scientific minds who are working to explore more about the ocean that will help us make the right decisions for the future, not just of the oceans and their health, but also the food that they deliver to us in terms of the fish that we eat. It needs to be sustainable. And I was also conscious in some of the presentations about how do we manage human beings, how do we manage change? And if I give you my agricultural background, it might help you see where I come from. Because in the 80s, when we were dealing with agriculture, and I was a journalist in those days, we were encouraging farmers to drain every acre of land they had, even if it was bogland. We were encouraging them to rip out hedgerows. This was public policy, make the fields bigger and use lots of fertilizer. And then we realized that you can only do that for some time, and nature gave a kickback. And we realized we had to be a little bit more careful. So today, Europe is encouraging farmers to replant hedgerows. Seems a simple idea, but we need to do that, to look at trees in the right location. We're also saying that perhaps there are areas of our country that need to be re-wetted, so that wetlands are important in terms of carbon and the climate challenge. And so it is with the oceans, that this idea of fishing and fishing without any regard to the consequences of stocks had to be pulled back. But it's difficult to get people who are engaged in that activity on board. My concern is that we will fail utterly if we continue to do what we're doing today. And that is where we have NGOs on this side and perhaps producers and fishers on the other side, rather than being on the same side. Because actually, you should be. Because the challenges that the environmental organizations want addressed are the challenges that the fishers and agriculturalists also need to be addressed. And I think that it was John Kerry who made that point, that the fishermen are there. We need them to take up the efforts we have around the different challenges of the oceans, just as we need the farmers who are on the ground to take up the challenges that they have, because they are there, literally boots on the ground. But how do we persuade people? We need to be positive, but also address and deliver where those problems are. And we need to do it in a way that brings people with us on the journey. I think we're only at the early stages. I think the awareness created by the whole plastics debate in the ocean has been positive in the sense of raising awareness. But I think it's also, if I may say, allowed some of us to feel good because we picked up a bit of litter. There's much more to this than simply that plastics challenge, as you know, because you are experts in this area. My other point is to our brothers and sisters from the islands who are here with us, and thank you for coming to Cork, and thank you for being here. The reason why Europe is important is I hope you see us as helping echo your voice on the global stage. Ireland as a voice alone, if we were not part of Europe, our voice would be weak. But as a part of the European Union, and me as first Vice President of the Parliament representing my country, we have a much stronger voice and can be more effective. So we need to hear more of you in the European Parliament, and I would welcome your engagement with us. There is, as you know, a changeover of the guard. A new Parliament will sit from July onwards as the old Parliament now moves out. And there are many more new members in that Parliament, so we will have to see how we settle on the many difficult issues that we face. Clearly, Brexit was mentioned earlier, and that's the first sign of disintegration at EU level. But if it has done anything, it has refocused very sharply the minds of our citizens. And for the first time, we have seen an increase in voter turnout in European Parliament elections. And John Kerry equally mentioned the importance of voting and the importance of holding politicians to account. My final remark is this, that when we are on this journey of change, we need to reflect on those who will be impacted negatively by the change that we know needs to happen. So when I was campaigning, I met lots of people who were talking about climate change, and some of them were concerned that their business, whether it was coal or oil, they would be put out of business. Some were concerned because the only heating they had in their homes was from fossil fuels, and were worried about the cost consequences. So we need to understand that there are concerns there and not to ignore them or to push them aside, because we will not get buy-in. And one of the things that pleased me in my recent journey in the Parliament was meeting a local community organisation in Dunleer in County Louth. It's part of an energy community, and they're working from the bottom up, helping older people refit their homes to make them more energy efficient and to switch energy use, and doing it in a very positive way. So whatever else you draw from this wonderful event, and again we thank you all for being here, is a message about change and how we bring people on a journey, and to invite and ask and hope that those who are from organisations that do great work on the environment, those who are from fishers organisations or land-based organisations, please work together. Division delays progress, and in fact it can have the opposite effect. And we do need to learn to work better together. When I went to the European Parliament 15 years ago, full of impatience because I wanted things done now, I realised I had to listen first and understand that if I don't communicate effectively by listening first and then bringing up my problems to the table, nothing gets done. So at this forum where so many are gathered with so much knowledge, power and influence, I think we can all go back to where we come from and make sure that the messages we pick up here, which have been quite profound, alarming, but also of great hope, are put into action. And I think a lot of the young people, and I admired Alicia this morning for her passion. At 17, I was passionate too, and I hope that the years don't dull our passion for positive change. I have children and perhaps hope to have grandchildren, but above all else, we want to make sure that we live in a planet that is more equal, that values people, that values our natural resources, and that doesn't talk about exploitation, because there is too much of that, exploitation of people and natural resources. And I want to end with a dramatic, perhaps, message, because the Mediterranean, that beautiful sea, has been a coffin for too many people fleeing horror and disaster, trying to get to the European Union. And the European Union has a moral, in my view, imperative to look outside our borders and to provide help. We're doing it with the Task Force for Africa. We're doing it with our engagements at the global level around oceans, and we need to do much more of it. We cannot protect ourselves by closing our eyes to the needs of others, and the only way we can, if you wish, use that word, protect ourselves, is to be open to understanding the challenges of many in this room and beyond, and helping you cope with those challenges, and not by our actions, in fact, inflicting even deeper wounds. So thank you for being here. Rest assured that the European Parliament is a friend that wants to help you on a journey, and perhaps we could learn from you. It was fascinating to listen to the ambassadors speak, and indeed, I was charmed to know that some of you are way ahead of what we're doing. So I've learned more here than perhaps I had anticipated, but that's very positive. So I hope you see not just Ireland as a friend, but the European Union, and particularly the Parliament that I represent here this morning, as a friend that we can work together for better for the future. Thank you and have a great afternoon.